You said something that has stuck with me forever, and you said, "Keep an open mind, keep an open heart," and you just told me to trust you that things are gonna happen if you stay open, and that's what I did. I just kept.
I really didn't think I had a problem with gambling. I thought my problem was that I just wasn't winning. If I could just stack together enough back-to-back wins, I wouldn't have any problems. And my personal opinion, not a GA opinion, my personal opinion is it's criminal that Robinhood, the same platform that holds your 401k, allows you to gamble.
All right. Hey, everybody. My guest today is someone that I have wanted to have on this podcast since the day it started. The person that you're about to meet, you guys know my clean date is February 8th, 2022. You know I was in Austin, Texas. The man you're about to meet is the person who chaired that meeting. Way too early to get emotional. It's he's an amazing man. He saved my life just like everyone else in that room. It is it's so fitting that today we did not plan this. He made his last bet 34 years ago today, July 2nd. And I am so happy to have him. He is a compulsive gambler. He is someone with lived experience. He's someone who has helped so many people over the last 34 years. Rocky M, welcome to the modern meeting, my friend.
Thank you, Adam. I'm so excited to be here. I read this great book a few years ago called God Winks, and the premise is that coincidences are God's way of staying anonymous. And
Yep.
what a God wink that you reached out and said, "Hey, we've been trading phone calls and text messages. Can you do it this week?" And we said, "Well, today or tomorrow," and you picked today, and here it is 34 years ago today, July 2nd, 1992, that I made my last bet. And that's got to be more than a coincidence. So
Oh my god. I mean,
very
it's
cool.
so amazing. I hope the chills subside. I've had chills for the last minute and 49 seconds. Oh man. So, Rocky, the first question I ask everybody, I will ask you the same one. Before we go back to the beginning of your story, do you remember the moment in which you realized, "Uh-oh, I may have a problem with gambling"?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Adam, I think what I realized over and over again was I have a problem with winning.
Okay.
And so really until I made the decision to come into GA, I really didn't think I had a problem with gambling. I thought my problem was that I just wasn't winning. If I could just stack together enough back-to-back wins, I wouldn't have any problems. And so, they talk about the insanity of this addiction, but to not be able to see for yourself the unmanageability of your life and the connectedness of that unmanageability to an addiction is, that's pretty insane. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much where I was. Um,
And when you had that realization or, when you so prior to July 2nd, 1992, was there ever a point where you acknowledged that, like, you needed help or, not to spoil the end of your story, but, like, was it your choice to get help or was it kind of a set of circumstances or someone else that.
yeah, what actually happened is, back when I was gambling, there was a guy named Bob Dunbar, and Bob Dunbar was a tout service that he called it the Millionaires Roundtable.
Mm,
And you would dial a 1-888 number and get charged, I don't know, $15 a call, and he would give you 4 picks. Years later, I read a Sports Illustrated article about this guy, and basically, he would give the east side of the Mississippi one set of the bets and the west side of the Mississippi the other. And so he always had half the country that was thinking he won. And
wow.
I had been married for about 9 months, and I had had my ex-wife, take out a loan. She was a lawyer and worked for a big bank, and she was able to get a signature loan, and I had gotten her to get a signature loan for, I think, $6,000. And I told her, "Hey, my business is just struggling. I got some slow pay clients, just get this loan and then I can, keep the business running and I'll, pay back next month when everybody catches up on their bills." And so she had gotten that loan, and one day she beat me home from work. And I used to always get home from work first because God knows what was going to be in that mailbox.
Mhm.
And she got home before me. She opened the mail and she found a phone bill for, about $600. And this was, a week after she had gotten the loan from the bank. I was actually out at dinner. I had taken my grandmother out to dinner. This is another part of my story is, it was my mom's mom, and she lived with my parents, and taking her out to dinner would be a good way of kind of placating my mom and getting her to think what a nice young son she had. And,
Mhm.
the whole thing was, really manipulative because whenever I needed money, I would tell my mom, and my mom would borrow money from my grandmother's account. And, and give that money to me, and supposedly I would pay it back. But so I had taken my grandmother back home, and I called my wife to say, "Hey, I'm on my way," and she said, "Get your ass home right now." And I didn't even have to ask why. I knew something with the gambling had finally surfaced. And, on the drive home, I was like, I checked the answering machine right before I left. I don't think there was any call from a bookie. I wasn't sure what it could be. And I started just thinking of the lies that I could tell, because that's what I did, to try and get myself out of this one. And, for whatever reason, I was just beat up enough, tired enough, just exhausted enough from the gambling that when I got back to the house and she said, "You've been gambling," I was like, "Yep, I have." And
Mhm.
I that and she packed a bag and left. And there was like such a huge sense of relief because I had been doing day trips to Vegas from Houston, and I was like, God, with her just kind of gone for a little while, I could just go out to Vegas and stay there for 3 or 4 days in a row, win enough money to pay back all the bookies. I had three different bookies that I owed money to, and get out of all this debt, and then everything will be fine. Um, and for whatever reason, and I think the reason was I had a college roommate who, he was like, dude, your gambling is like crazy. Like he gambled, but he's like, "Not like you gamble." And he had joked with me because the lottery had just started in Texas. He was like, "There's a number on the back of those tickets. Maybe you should call that number." And I sat alone in the condo for 4 or 5 hours, and then I was like, "I'm gonna call that number."
Wow.
And that's when I got started with GA.
Wow. Amazing. Now, we're gonna keep the audience in suspense. I have so many follow-ups, and I wanna know what happened after that, but first, we're gonna go back to the beginning. So, tell us where you grew up, what was it like growing up, and when was gambling first introduced to you?
So, I was the oldest of four kids. We were all 2 years apart. And when I finished fifth grade, we moved from New Jersey to Houston, Texas. And, my dad had worked for Exxon, and he commuted into Manhattan every day from a suburb in New Jersey. And when we moved to Houston, he was like done with that. He's like, "I'm not commuting anymore. I want to be able to ride a bike to work if I feel like it."
Mm,
And so he plopped us down in a very wealthy neighborhood in Houston. And meanwhile, my mom was a college professor. My dad had a PhD in chemistry. He was a kind of junior executive at Exxon, but we weren't in that kind of high flying crowd that everybody I was around was in. And, I started at school and I was saying, park the car, walk the dog, drink the water,
I was gonna say.
and, everybody else was talking about y'all and I was still you guys. And, like I didn't fit in at all. I had been a good baseball player, little league in New Jersey, man, in Houston, Texas. Nobody cared about baseball. It was football. It was
Mm,
more than a sport. It was like a religion. And in New Jersey, you could start school until December 31st. In Texas, you had to start school by August 31st. If your birthday was after that, you were the next year. So I had been the youngest in New Jersey, but shit, I was a year younger than everybody in my, grade when I moved to Texas. And so, I was like could fall into another guy's cleats out on the football field.
right.
I was, tiny.
Yeah.
And so I didn't fit in. I got to high school. I was still trying to I'd worked real hard on my accent and got the y'alls down and, talk about your dad being in the all business and everything that implies. And, I was trying very hard to fit in. And, um, in high school, I had some friends who played a poker game and it was kind of low stakes, but I would always, play and thought that was fun. But it was really when I got to college. I had gone to an all boys Catholic high school and, we didn't know much about fraternities or sororities or that, Greek lifestyle. And I got to Texas and everybody, was in a fraternity. And so I joined this fraternity and there was a guy in the frat who was a 6 year senior, and his dad owned a huge, multinational engineering firm. Everybody in the frat hated this guy. He had gotten like a perfect score on his LSAT, trying to go to law school. His dad had bought him a Jaguar, like $40,000 car. This is back in the 78, 79 time frame, and he was just an asshole. And but everybody would get together on Saturdays to watch football games and he would bet, and whatever side of the game he took, I would always take the other side. And
Mm.
like everybody was rooting, I thought for me, but really they were rooting against this guy because everybody thought he was a big dork. So, but suddenly that made me feel a part of instead of apart from. And so that's really where my gambling got started. And then it accelerated from there.
Now, was it always sports betting, or did you do casinos as well?
Yeah, it started out sports betting and then I was working my way through college at the Texas Capitol and I remember I think it was about a junior year of college. One of my roommates had a dad who was in the oil business and he was uh, you know everything that implied, and they invited me to go out to Vegas for the weekend. And I remember I had gone to the ATM machine and gotten $300 to take out to Vegas. And we got out there late, late Thursday night. And Friday morning, we were, sitting in the casino lobby, and I was with his four sons, and we were literally having an orgy of food. I mean, everything was comped for Mr. C. And so we were having steaks, we were having pancakes, we were just, like, I mean, it was just like literally an orgy of food. And Mr. Carr came to the table and he started out dishing out $100 bills to each of his sons, $1,000 for you, $1,000 for you, $1,000 for you. And then he came to me and he's like, "Here's $1,000." I was like, I can't take your money." And he was like, "No, you won't have any fun if you bet with your own money. You got to take some money." I was like, "No, I just can't do that." Well, he dragged me out of the booth onto the casino floor and he started playing blackjack at $1,000 a hand. He's just laying down those black chips one at a time. And I just never forget, he lost 8 hands in a row. And he said, "It's not money, it's just chips." And I said, "Well, I tell you what, I'm not going to take $1,000 from you, but if you want to give me one of those black chips, I'll take that from you." And by the time the weekend was over, that $1,000 was gone. My $300 was gone. I had borrowed $500 from one of his sons and 300 from another. And so my very first time in Vegas, I was totally addicted, but I was also a total loser.
I mean, as you're describing Mr. C, he literally sounds like the devil. Like, the way I'm sure he was a nice guy. I'm just saying the fact that he's like, "Ah, it's just chips." I mean, to say that to and how old were you at the time?
Probably, 19, 20 years old.
Right. So do you remember, like, when the dust settles and you lose it all, what was your thought process? Did you just chalk it up to like, "Ah, it's just a fun weekend and I only lost 300 on my own," or were you already thinking like, "This doesn't feel right?"
Oh, no. I thought this was the best thing in my life. I didn't care about how much money I lost. I had all these free cocktails. We were staying in a suite at the Mirage. Siegfried and Roy was this big magic show with lions. We went to that and they disappeared. And, I mean, it was just like everything was kind of bigger than life out there, and I wanted Mr. C's lifestyle. I
Mm,
wanted to be the high roller, the big shot, so you can lose 10,000 bucks in 5 minutes and not even blink an eye.
right.
That's the life I wanted. And I was bummed about losing the money, but I was just convinced I didn't know enough about playing blackjack. And so if I just studied up on it, I would learn the rules and I could be a lot more successful at this.
So now as you have this, you have this dream now of wanting to be like him, what was your life outside of gambling like in your 20s, and how did you fund your gambling as you progressed into like adulthood?
So, I was working at the Texas Capitol, and I was a legislative assistant to a state rep, and he was from out in the hill country, and it's kind of a country environment. And so, he was friends with all the bankers, all the doctors, all the realtors, and various people from his district would come in and I would get to know these guys. And, I wasn't able to get back out to Vegas after that trip with Mr. C, but I was able to very easily get a bookie at the University of Texas. And so I got heavy, heavy, heavy into sports gambling and I got myself buried twice. But both times I, drove out to the hill country and met with a banker out there and told him I just need a little bit of help with a loan, uh, pay for school, total lie, and got signature loans from bankers because of this position I held, working for a state rep, and so I never had to really confront my parents with I've got this, this gambling problem. So I got pretty much through college with knowing that I could get myself into a real bind, but also having been able to get myself out of the bind without having to involve, family or friends.
Mm,
And so, on the surface, my life looked pretty good. I'm a college kid and worked my way up from being a tour guide at the Capitol to a Senate messenger to a research assistant to a legislative aide to a chief of staff. Um, and then I had the chance to go to Washington, D.C. I worked on a campaign for a guy who was running for Congress. He won. I went up to D.C. at 24. I was the youngest chief of staff on the Hill, and actually for 2 years I didn't gamble at all. I didn't know any bookies up in D.C. And actually, D.C. was as intoxicating for me as Vegas had been. And so, I just was able to kind of not think about gambling because I was just so into all the political stuff.
mm,
It was, about 27, 28, getting back to Houston, deciding to get into political consulting, that the gambling, immediately picked up again. And then somehow in the midst of all the gambling, I got engaged. And this is one of the ones I really, I don't have a lot of regrets looking back. I'm grateful for everything, but um, you know, the things that we do while we're in addiction, are not the things that we're proudest of. And there was one time where, there was a Super Bowl game where I had a parlay, a tease, an over, and the game, and I won all four of them. I won like $15,000, and my buddy and I decided, hey, let's take. He had a serious girlfriend. I had a girlfriend I'd been, dating for a year and a half or so, and he's like, let's go out to Vegas for the weekend. And we went out there, and there's a 2 hour difference between Houston and Vegas, and So around midnight in Vegas, it's like 2 a.m. in Houston, and my girlfriend's like, "Well, let's go back to the hotel room." And we're staying at the Mirage, and they had this people mover, a flat escalator basically, and it would go by the Siegfried and Roy white tigers and lions, and we're on that people mover, and she looks at me and she goes, "Where are we going?" I said, "Well, it goes back into the hotel," and she goes, "No, where are we going? You and I. Where is this relationship going?" I was like, "Well, where do you want it to go?" And she said, "Well, we been dating a year and a half. If we're gonna, move forward with this, we should get engaged." And I said, "You want to get engaged?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, we're engaged. Let's get married." And she was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Really?" And she was like, so happy. She's like, "Let's go call our parents." And I was like, "Oh, your parents live in Ohio. I mean, it's 2 o'clock in the morning in Houston. It's 3 o'clock in the morning there. Why don't you go to bed? I'm gonna go back down and gamble for a little bit, and then in the morning we'll call our parents." And Adam, I'll never forget this. I won $10,000 that night gambling, and for the first time in my life, I had a $10,000 chip. And I walked back into that room at 8 in the morning, and I was on cloud nine. I mean, I was the happiest you've ever seen me in my life. And of course, she thought it was because we had just gotten engaged.
Oof.
That was not even going through my head until she was like, "Well, should we call our parents now?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that too." And so, we ended up, getting married, but it was a very short-lived, marriage. 9 months later, we had the incident I talked to you about where she moved out. She came back, and we tried to make it work for several months, and then she was like, I'm not gonna make this work." And so, I had never, I'd had a lot of girlfriends, never had one that I couldn't get back, together with. And so I didn't really want to be the first one in my family to ever get divorced.
Mm,
But that's where I found myself. And, that's when I made the call, got into GA after that thing with my grandmother. But, being in GA didn't save my marriage. And so when she told me that she wanted to get divorced, which was right after Christmas of 1992, that's when I had to decide, am I doing this GA thing for her or for me? And by that point, I decided divorced, single, I got to get better because this life is just screwed up. And
yeah.
so that was a real turning point.
I mean, what a perfect example going back to the $10,000 chip. When we say all the time that it's not about the money, you said one of your biggest regrets, and one of your biggest regrets is when you won, but the circumstances in which the next morning and that just, not being able to be truthful and being happy for the chip and not for being engaged. I mean, oh my God, like that's just that's so unique and it's so amazing. But like I said, it's not about the money, right? Like this disease is not about the money yet. When we're in the thick of it, that's all we think about.
I had no concept that I was going to get engaged when I flew out to Vegas. That was not even on my radar, And so, I mean, that's
Oh,
where prison, insanity, and death. I was
yeah.
definitely in that insane category for sure.
So now I thought we were still like in the 80s. So the woman that you got engaged to in Vegas, she's the one who kind of expedited or that was what got you into GA.
Yep.
So would you say that, with the exception of a couple of those loans, was there a ton of financial damage that your gambling did? Like ultimately, do you think if you weren't caught, would you have still stayed out? And how long do you think it would have took you to get help?
No, I mean, in the book they talk about a slow, subtle deterioration, which
Yeah.
finally brought us to the point of admitting defeat.
Mm,
And uh, when I had moved from DC back to Houston in '87, the kind of years of gambling between '87 and '92, that 5 year period, I had maxed out credit cards, I had lost credit cards, I had been locked out of my office for not paying rent. There had been lots of, embarrassing, moments, um, uh, you know, but, um, but it was really when she said, "I'm moving out and then you're moving out." That was, everybody's elevator kinda has a different, floor that it hits bottom on, and for me, that was it. I was just like,
Yeah.
"Man, I've only been married 9 months, and now I'm losing my marriage, my company's falling apart." Uh, you
Yeah.
know, and then, I think I was kind of at that rock bottom where there was kinda some solid ground to rebuild from.
Mm. So now, before we get to when you and I met, we got 30 years of amazing recovery in GA to hear about. So, take us to, July, August, September of 92. What were those early days in GA like for you? And, you know, what were when you look back on it now, how much have the rooms changed, if anything, in your perspective from then till now?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of 3 things I like to talk about there, but the first is, when I first came into GA, I got a sponsor who was an attorney. He had been with Pennzoil, who had a huge lawsuit, and he helped, win this lawsuit, and I chose him as my sponsor because he looked like the right guy. He looked successful, he drove the nice car, all those kind of things, and, probably 3 months into the program, he headed back out to Vegas. And, they were pretty strict in the GA room that, you have to have at least a year of clean time to sponsor somebody. So I had to find a new sponsor. And one of the best decisions I ever made was the second time around, I looked for the biggest hard ass in the program to sponsor me. Tony W was a force of nature. He was a Cajun who had joined the Marine Corps at 16, lying about his age. He did, I don't know, 4 or 5 tours of duty in Vietnam. He was behind enemy lines in Cambodia. He was a Marine Corps drill sergeant. And, he was a hard ass. And the first thing he told me when he sponsored me is, "You're not going to watch any sports for a year on TV.
Yeah.
Nothing. Not
Yeah.
on the radio, not on TV." He's like, "When you get the paper, you open the paper, you take out the sports section, you put it in the trash, and then you can read the newspaper. If you're watching the news and the sports comes on, switch the channel to the other station, watch the weather until the sports comes on there, and then switch back to the original station." I mean, and for whatever reason, he's like, how great coaches are the mixture of hard ass and love. I mean, that was Tony. Like, I knew he cared so much about me, but he also set super high standards, and so, that really turbocharged my recovery. The second thing is, people talk about the powerlessness and the unmanageability. I really knew my life was unmanageable. I mean, getting locked out of your office, losing credit cards, getting divorced. I mean, duh. But the powerlessness I struggled with. The idea that this was a disease seemed like a cop out to me.
Yep.
And so for me, the big breaking point or the transition where I think my recovery really started to take off is um, I couldn't really admit that I was powerless over gambling. I just thought if I tried harder, I could have probably figured out how to stop, even though I had tried hundreds of times, to stop or to moderate the gambling unsuccessfully. What I figured out is I can't win. And yes, I could win a bet. Yes, I could win 4 or 5 bets. But if I won $1,000, it wasn't enough. I needed $10,000. And that one time I won 10,000, that wasn't enough. I needed 100,000. If I won 100, I would need, what I finally figured out is, well, if I could win $20 million, that would be enough to change my life. Anything short of that. And so when you say that out loud to yourself, you realize this is just crazy. There's no way I'm ever going to, win $20 million starting with $100 bets. I mean, And so when I realized I can't win because I can't stop, then I was able to say I am powerless over winning. And once I got there, then it wasn't too far longer before I was powerless over gambling. And somewhere around 9 months into the program, the miracle happened. And we always tell people hang around till the miracle happens. In our day at a time book, it says, talking yourself out of gambling is like trying to talk yourself out of a cold. You have a cold and you go, I'm not going to have a cold. You still have a cold, right? So with gambling, for me, it was like an itch. And when I had an itch, there was only one solution. That was to scratch that itch. And somewhere around 9 months, what God did for me is he took away that itch. And I mean, I know that was, you know, that was my miracle because I couldn't take that itch away, but somehow he just removed the itch. And I went from, 7 by 24 thinking about gambling to not really thinking about gambling, you know, and so that was a miracle. The last point that I would just make is in terms of the room and how it's changed. Um, when I came into GA, Tony was a hard ass, but they were all hard asses. I
Mm,
remember my first meeting. This guy told me 1 out of 27 people who comes into GA makes it clean for 90 days, and you don't look like that one. And,
wow.
I was like, and this was in Houston. This wasn't New York or Miami. This was like
Right.
kindler, gentler Southern hospitality, Houston. And man, people were just hard asses. And, that first guy who told me that, I was going to make it clean 90 days just to show him,
Yeah.
for starters. But besides kind of just being kind of a hard ass culture, there was very little step work,
Mm,
and a couple of years ago, when I'm on vacation, I love to read. I love to read all the time, but especially on vacation, I always read kind of trashy novels, spy novel, war books, something. And about 5 years ago, I made a deal with myself. For every time I read a trashy book, I'm going to read a good book. This last vacation I was on, and a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago in May, I read this book called Stage Two Recovery Beyond the Addiction. And this is an old book. It was written in 1985, I think. But the guy's he doesn't take anything away from stage one, which is abstinence. But in his years and years of working with addicts, what he consistently found is somewhere between the year 2 and year 6, even people who have been working a good program or have been working a program in the 12 step rooms hit a wall. They're still having these interpersonal problems. They're still having, fights with their spouse. Maybe they're, not talking to their kids anymore. They're still getting fired from their jobs. And it's because all they've done is gotten to abstinence, not to recovery. And,
yeah.
if you work steps 1, 2, and 3, you might be able to get to abstinence. But I've got a buddy in the mental health field who says something I really like. He says, 12 step or abstinence is necessary but not sufficient. And so you got to work those other steps to get to recovery. And when I came in, we didn't have the step one pamphlet. We basically had the 20 questions, and we had a fourth step inventory that was you know, it still is a 25-page booklet that just seemed like a man, how am I ever going to get through that?
Mm.
And so they're unlike AA, the early days of GA were not very focused on step work.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many thoughts based on all that. First thought is it's so fun to be able to talk to you now that I have some recovery under my belt and like I have so many things to share with you, which we'll get we'll get to in a second. And then the other thing, you're talking about that miracle and how you just described it. It happened to me by 7:30 p.m. February 8th, 2022. when I've said this 100 times on this podcast, and now I get to finally say it to you in person, so I gotta slow down and make sure I can keep it together, but, like, when I walked into that room and you and Leah and, you guys are shaking my hand, eye contact, welcoming me, and in my mind, driving there with my buddy Phil, I was like, "Why are they welcoming me? Like, I'm a degenerate, I'm a loser, like, I'm in a this is a GA meeting." And I'll never forget when we were waiting for you to unlock the door outside, why are people laughing? Why are people joking? Like, this is am I in the wrong place, right?
Right.
But all of that welcoming, beautiful energy, and then once we start reading that yellow book, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but, like, I was weeping before I even spoke. I could barely say, "My name is Adam, I'm a compulsive gambler," because it all just started hitting me. Like, this is where I was supposed to be. Like, it's like the book was written for me, and that was the miracle. I mean, Rocky, I tell you, like, I have never had an urge to gamble after February 8th, 2022, and I people ask me all the time, like, "How?" Because people who knew me for the 20 years that I gambled, but I can't explain it. But so I guess that's my follow-up question to you is, it's an impossible question to answer, but I want you to try. What makes me that 1 out of 27 that made it?
It's a gift from God. I mean,
I
that's
I agree.
because the stats are depressing. 1 out of 27 makes it clean for 90 days, and out of the ones who make it clean for 90 days, 1 out of 4 makes it clean for a year. So that's like 0.9%. So
God,
we are the blessed, we are the fortunate 1% who made it, and what I've just, come to believe is it has nothing to do with you or me. It's a gift from God. And why we got the gift and other people don't, I don't know. Why we got the disease and other people don't, I don't know. When we get to heaven, we can have a whole list of things to kind of ask God about. But I am just so, uh, I just feel so blessed that I'm in that 1%. And it really softens your heart to the 99%
mm,
who don't make it. And, I think, some people need 2 or 3 tries. Everybody's elevator stops at a different, floor on the way down. And, you know, you and I had enough pain. There's other people coming to the program that haven't had that level of pain yet. And, um, that's why I keep going to meetings because, I do remember your first meeting and I remember just watching you sob and like, I mean, when I see something like that, I usually close my eyes and I just say a prayer and I'm like, God, please help him, get through this first meeting. Um, it just at the same time I'm praying that I'm like, and thank you, God, that that's not me, because it was me. But it's also been a lot of other people who've come through those doors over the years who they don't come back and they
yeah,
don't make it and they're still out there and the pain, their pain threshold has got to be a lot higher than ours. um but yeah, we lucky few.
yeah. Oh, man. You just as you're talking, I can picture it. I mean, I can picture it in my head like it was yesterday. I can picture the way the table was set up. I can picture, a couple people sitting on, a couple of the women were sitting like uh on like chairs with their legs, with their legs crisscrossed, like and it was such I couldn't get over the diversity of the room. So many, young, old, male, female. And I tell this all the time. I want to tell you, like, so driving to that first meeting in Austin, I can remember telling my buddy Phil, like, we're about to walk into a GA meeting. It's going to look like, the casino at 5 a.m., right? And then I'll never forget, like, when I first walked in and, like, scanned the room, and that's when everyone kept coming up to me and shaking my hand and stuff. And I'm like, I'm the schlubbiest looking person in the room. Everybody looks great. Like, looks put together. They're attractive. They're all compulsive gamblers. Like, what is happening, right? So it was just all these different all these different things just it was just like a perfect storm of like compassion and just this eye-opening amazing thing that I had no idea existed, you know? But once again, I think to your point, I needed to be ready to accept all of that, which, you know, brings me to what I've been wanting to talk to you about for over 4 years now is, you know, I think it was probably in between meetings 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 where I had floated to you via text that, you know, I don't believe in God at this point, and for a higher power, it seems like this higher power concept is pretty important, you know, and I told you that I think I was gonna do the fellowship for now, and you said that was okay, and then I remember when I got back to the Northeast, I was probably, I don't know, 30 days in because I went to 3 meetings with you guys, and then I went back to the Northeast, and I texted you and I said, "You know, Rocky, I wanna believe, but I can't right now, but the fellowship I believe in the fellowship." I mean, God bless that old timer in Austin, I can't remember his name, but he called me. He called me 2 days he called me on February 10th just checking in on me,
Yeah.
um, but you said something that has stuck with me forever, and you said, "Keep an open mind, keep an open heart," and you just told me to trust you that things are gonna happen if you stay open, and that's what I did, I kept going to meetings and I kept just, I all that skepticism of those 20 years of gambling and science versus faith, and if I can't see it, it's not real. I slowly but surely let go of all that, and and then things started happening. These God winks, right? Things started happening, and the whole time, every time they happened, I thought of you, and I just and then around the 6-month mark, I believed again, and I started praying, and I started saying like, "No, this my higher power is God. I'm back. I'm sorry I was gone," and just the way that I pray now and the way that I talk to God, it's not wishing for anything, it's asking for guidance, it's thanking, it's gratitude, and, everything I have now everything I have now is because of you and that group in Austin, so, for the millionth time, I just wanna thank you.
Well, you're too kind. I don't think it's me. I do think that that's, God at work. And, you know, what I think is a real misnomer about 12-step programs is so many people have a negative experience at some point in their youth with religion.
Mm,
I know I did. And, religion and spirituality are two such different things. I love that, old kind of saw about, religion is for people who don't want to go to hell. Spirituality is for people who have been there and don't want to go back.
holy
Um, you
shit.
know,
Oh my god.
and I mean, I had been to hell, through this gambling, and I didn't want to go back. And that's where the 12 steps really came into play. But the my wife and I are going to go to Italy next summer, and so I've been planning the trip and being on AI and trying to plan out things. And of course, we're going to go see the Sistine Chapel. But Michelangelo, when he painted the top of the Sistine Chapel, there's this beautiful painting of God, with the long flowing beard, with this just muscular as all get out arm. And I mean, Adam, he is reaching out with everything he's got. And then there's the biblical Adam laying back in his chair with a pinky out like this, and to me, that's always been so illustrative of my higher power, my God,
Mm,
because he's just looking for that pinky's worth of effort from us. That's all. And
yeah.
and he's never going to force himself on us. But, if you'll just give that pinky worth of effort, you will find, that there is this unbelievable power that loves you so much that is just reaching out to say, let me help you experience that good life that I created you for. I did not create you to survive. I created you to thrive, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what, GA has given me is, a real personal relationship with a God who is not the fire and brimstone of Sister Agnes Gabriel that I grew up with, but this unbelievable love. And I'll say that, truthfully, that unconditional love was not something I fully grokked until my wife and I had kids. Our first, child is a daughter, and when Carolina was born, um, you know, I would get up in the middle of the night to feed her because Janet was, sleeping, and I'd have that bottle, and I'd be, have her in the crook of my arm. I'd just be looking down, looking at those two big brown eyes staring back at me, and I remember telling her one time, like, I don't care if you're an axe murderer, there's no way I will ever stop loving you.
Yeah.
And as much as I love my wife, if she was catting around on me or cheating on me, like, I would try and get over it. I think I would still be able to love her, but I don't know. Like, love is pretty conditional, but when it's your child like that, I just felt that unconditional love. And I was like, if I, as an imperfect human, can feel that kind of love for this little child, imagine how much more love a heavenly father can have towards me. And that was really a breakthrough for me on, understanding this unconditional love of God.
I mean, amen. And I just, I can hear, certain people, certain skeptics in recovery rolling their eyes or fast forwarding right now. And I, uh, I hope that you eventually find what I found and what Rocky found. And, I'll pray. I'm praying for you, and it's like, because it truly is a beautiful thing. And it truly is the key to my recovery. I think it's something you said earlier where whenever I don't even get urges, but if I get thoughts or dreams or if someone brings it up, all I have to do is think about what happens after that first bet. I just need to go 4 or 5 steps down the road, and like you said, even if I win, I am in I am unable to manage that bankroll or to just walk away. I will eventually give it all back. I could win $1,000,000. It's gonna take a little bit longer, but it's all going back, and I accept that because it is a disease. It is what it is, right? Um, so I've taken up way too much of your time. I got a few more questions. So obviously, I believe, lucky. I think it's fate. It was my higher power that I wasn't acknowledging at the time, but I was lucky enough to walk into that Tuesday night meeting in Austin, Texas. That was amazing. I've also walked into meetings that are cold, are unwelcoming. And if you get that new person who walks into one of those rooms and they never go back, so what have you what do you think makes that Tuesday night meeting so warm? And is it something that you and the other veterans have implemented? Is it basically, I guess the question is, what makes a meeting welcoming versus not welcoming?
So, my belief is that the 12-step programs are a three-legged stool, and the three legs of the stool are meetings, fellowship, and the steps. And, fellowship at a base level is, sponsor and sponsee relationship. But what it really is, it's about building friendships. And, when I first went to my first meetings in Houston, they had a Monday night meeting. And after the Monday night meeting, everybody would go to this place called On the Border, and they would have ice cream sundaes, you know, and, they would sit around and just talk and get to know each other. And then, guys would go out and play golf together. And, that is fellowship. Fellowship is doing life with other, addicts. So like tonight, at 5 o'clock, I'm meeting the son of one of my guys that I sponsor. He's, a junior in college, going back for his senior year, and he wants to get some advice on career planning. And, that's something I know a little bit about. And so, I'm going to go do that. But I get entree to that opportunity because of the trust that I've built up with his dad through GA. So, I would say that, I have a pretty small circle of really tight friends. I think about friendships like a dartboard. And, I got some guys in the bullseye, but there's not like a bunch of them.
Mm,
There's, four to five guys that I would say are in my bullseye. Then I got some guys on the next circle and the next circle. Um, but, these guys that I do life with, one of them every morning, he writes me something about the blue book and I write him something back. And, to me, that is part of working the steps is
mhm,
writing. And, I can't explain to people how this works, any more than anybody could explain to me how GA worked when I first came in. But I will tell you definitively, something different happens when you put pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard and you write that is different than what happens when you do talk, and
mhm,
it's, I think it's a vehicle for God to help you understand some things about yourself that you didn't before. And, as this guy and I write back and forth, and I got another guy in North Carolina, a young guy that I sponsor there, and we're going through the steps together. And as he's writing the steps, I'm writing back, and like it triggers memories of things that, I'd totally forgotten. And now I'm kind of telling my story, in writing, and I'm getting some perspective around it. And then it makes it easier for me to share about that in person in a meeting. But it has, it's given me the self kind of realization that I think this program is all about. Ultimately, gambling is not our problem. Gambling is a symptom of some inner sickness. And I mean, if really tried to define that sickness, I was not comfortable in my own skin.
mm,
All the way back to, the fraternity days of the Cap Sig house. Like, I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt less than, and, gambling was what I used as the crutch to make me feel comfortable in my own skin. I can tell you that now I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin,
yeah,
and it's because this process of working the steps, has helped me to, really better understand what makes me tick.
yeah. Now, we talked about the 1 out of 27 earlier, and this is something that I've gotten better with, but I definitely continue to struggle with is being in meetings and watching the people that come in and out, watching the people that come in and, they're balls to the wall for 30 days and then they disappear. How do you, as, a 34-year veteran, as, someone who's usually, I'm sure, the pillar of any room he is in at this point, how do you process the 26 out of 27 that don't make it?
Well, I mean, first off, I think we have a chance of upping those odds by
Mm,
having dinner with people before meetings. The meeting before the meeting after the meeting. If you wanna know
mhm,
what creates fellowship, that's what creates fellowship. So the first thing I would tell anybody who's, going into any 12-step program is if the meeting's over and nobody's hanging around talking or going out and getting coffee or having a meal, it's probably not a very healthy room,
mm,
and keep looking until you find a healthy room. Um, the second thing is, I've figured out it's really, it's not about me. If somebody makes it or doesn't make it, they didn't make it because of me, and they didn't go back to gambling because of me. If you want to go back out to gambling, there's nothing me or anybody else can say or do to get in your way of doing that. So I've tried really hard over the years not to take it personally when somebody goes out. Um, but I've also tried really hard not to be judgmental about it because there for the grace of God go I, and by the way, I've struggled with food, I've struggled with smoking, I've struggled with a lot of things, and you know, I struggle a lot with judgmentalism,
Yeah.
and especially with family, and so like, oh, I'm not gonna say anything negative about that, cousin or nephew or niece, and then 2 hours later, so we all have kind of things that we continue to struggle with, and so I just try and put it in that perspective of, "Hey, Rocky, you're a long way from perfect, pal. So, this guy's still in the struggle zone you know, and that's sad. But some people are ready, some people aren't."
Mm, so well put. Oh, man. It's so awesome. Last question, and obviously, the gambling landscape has changed, since 1992, and even honestly since 2022. When I came in, the apps were there, but, like, it wasn't in all the states, it wasn't legalized. So in 2026, when Rocky is in a meeting and a young person comes in and, they're telling you and they're giving you all the reasons and excuses of why it's so hard and the advertising and the apps and everything, what do you say to the modern day gambler when they come into a meeting and they're saying, like, it's a lot harder now to stop because everything is so much more accessible? What do you say to that person?
First thing is, I totally agree with you. I
Mm,
mean, I've been seeing a ton of young guys come into the program. And I mean, my personal opinion, not a GA opinion, my personal opinion is it's criminal that Robinhood, the same platform that holds your 401k, allows you to gamble. I mean, that's
absolutely.
that's crazy. And Zuck is out there and he's going to start allowing gambling because Kashi and Poly markets are, making a fortune. And so this gambling thing is just exploding. We're at the tip of the iceberg. Um, so, uh, I agree, I mean, I had to go through effort to make a bet, I mean, the only time you could make a prop bet when I was gambling was to go out to Vegas for the
Mm,
Super Bowl. Then you could bet on heads or tails or who scored the first touchdown, but you couldn't even do that on a regular season game,
mm,
And now, I used to take the Cowboys over the Giants and maybe I'd have an over under and the winner. But now every play is a bet. Is the next pass play going to be a pass play or a run play? More than 5 yards, less than 5 yards. I mean, it's just you now have a ball game that turns into 200 bets. It's like a slot machine.
mm,
So is it harder? Absolutely. Um, but at the same time, the addiction is the same. Is the availability is significantly greater, but the trick is to figure out how to live without the crutch.
mhm,
And so the real problem is not gambling. The real problem is I can't do life on life's terms. I want everything on my terms. And as long as that's my attitude, I'm going to need a crutch. And if it's not gambling, it'll become alcohol. If it's not alcohol, it'll become food. If it's not food, it'll become porn. And if it's not porn, it'll become something else because life is never going to be on Rocky's terms. Life is always going to be on life's terms. And life is hard. Life's a bitch,
mm.
and then you die. I mean, it's like life is not easy.
Mm,
So you got to be able to figure out how to do that, and so even with all the availability, the key is to realize, what the underlying root cause is, and yes, you have to stop the addiction so that you can get to those character defects and those self-defeating habits and find out what it is that is really, the core. But, one of the greatest tragedies in my mind is not online gambling or DraftKings. One of the greatest tragedies in my mind is that compulsive gamblers rewrote the 12th step. The 12th step in AA says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message of hope to other alcoholics who are still suffering. GA took out the having had a spiritual awakening. And they took out that the spiritual awakening happens as a result of these steps. The spiritual awakening is what makes you realize that there is a God and I'm not him.
Yeah.
And, when I came into the room, I thought I was him. And I'll just leave you with this. One of the best things I heard was at a GA conference after I first joined the program. I was maybe 3 or 4 months into the program, and we had a GA convention in Houston. And this guy named Chris from Chicago, who was studying to be a therapist, said that of all the addicts in the world, there is no group that needs a higher power more than compulsive gambler. And the reason for that, he said, is that, when you are compulsively gambling, you are in the realm of the divine because only the divine owns the act of creation. To make something out of nothing, that's God's business, not our business. And yet, if I say, give me a dime on the Cowboys -7 and they cover, I've created $1,000 out of nothing. I have become God. I have
Oh my.
involved myself in the act of creation. And so we need that spiritual awakening to put us back into understanding we are the he is the creator, we are the created. We are the creature. We are not the creator. And I'm sure every addiction needs that, but I don't think other addicts are creating, you know, something out of nothing in the way that gamblers are. So we have got to have that spiritual awakening.
I mean, Rocky, what a mic drop moment that was. Oh my god. I mean, I know we've texted over the years, but, like, it is so good to see you and hear your voice, brother. I mean, I cannot thank you enough. I hope someday to come back down to Austin. If you're ever up in the Northeast, you gotta look me up. Do you ever go to any of the, like, national conferences or anything?
Yeah, I was a trustee for a couple of years and probably get in trouble for saying this, but if you really want to see the addiction in full blown Technicolor, go to a GA conference because, like, when I would go, like, there's these guys who haven't gambled for 10 years and they're smoking their brains out, and then they're
Oh,
eating
yeah.
candy and weigh
Oh.
300 pounds. And I just always thought trustee meetings were for people who ran for student council and never made it. So
Wow.
I say
Oh.
that as somebody who was a trustee for a couple of
Sure,
years.
sure.
But I read this good book a few years ago about, the first half of life and the second half of life. And they say the first half of life is about success. The second half is about significance. And I think if I'm a trustee, I'm in the first half of life. I don't want to be in the first half. I want to be in the second half. And so working one on one with compulsive gamblers just gives me way more satisfaction than figuring out if we should have a comma between these two words in the combo book or if we should change, this pronoun to that pronoun. Some of the
Yeah,
things that happen at those trustee meetings are important, but well, or they're urgent. I don't know if they're important.
I can only imagine. Oh, man. Well, Rocky, congratulations, 34 years, amazing. I am so glad we got to share this hour together on this day. Tell everyone in Austin I say hello, and,
Will do.
yeah, I can't thank you enough for being on the Modern Meeting.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me, Adam. And thanks for doing this. This is a great service on your part because there's a lot of ways to reach people, and this is a great way. So thanks for letting me be a part of your victory here.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Rocky.
Talk to you soon.
Alright, we'll be right back.